Howdy, 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 folks. We are live. Just getting started. We are a couple seconds late, and give me just a moment while I fiddle with mic positions and get things ready to rock, and we will be on the air right about now. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the ComicBase live stream. This is number 21. We'll be talking about the Splitsville between UCS and DC Comics. Their marriage was short, but apparently very tempestuous. And we barely got to know them before it was all over. I also want to talk about some things that we've been doing lately just around the office and get your questions. Please, this is actually one show where I kind of desperately need you guys to send me questions for things about ComicBase, because otherwise I fear I'm going to get off on a rant about other things I just honestly don't want to get onto, which have been on my mind lately, and honestly, who needs that? So anyway, welcome to the show. Let me just make sure that all the chat stuff is properly working here, so give me just a second till we get to the right place. There we are. Sweet! Alright, and I got to flip the keying on so that we can actually see these chats as I click on them. There we are, sweet. Greg says, hi everyone, in humid in South Jersey, but sunny will take it. Sweet. Snowy, you're kidding me. 3 degrees Celsius, Alberta, Canada. Wow, we cover a lot of territory here. Don't see the folks, we got Virginia, we got NoCal in the house, Phoenix and Calgary. I don't see anyone from Australia today, but you know, we can only all hope. Yeah, we can all drink during these now, right? Good grief. Yeah, I you wonder about how much to say on live streams, and one of the things I very much wonder about is like, should we really talk about our relative alcohol consumption this year versus last year? No, we probably don't wanna. No, I'm gonna save my drinking till after 5. It's the one little bit of discipline I've got going around that whole thing. But we actually do have some lovely days out here in Franklin. By the way, Franklin, Tennessee. I got called out on that. Apparently, I said Franklin, California last broadcast, and I'll wait till after the show, then I'll tip one back and probably actually even play some board games tonight. So who knows? All right. Well, anyway, the big story. Actually, let me get my show notes up there before I get into it, because I have things. Yeah. So I wanted to start with some lighter stuff. The variance article that we were talking about last time out, where we went over the data for how variants have changed over time. The short version being that in 1940, the variants were 0.32% of the comics market. By 2010, they were skirting with 45.88% of the market, and by 2020, 68.84% of all the comics published so far this year are variants of one sort or another. If you think this isn't out of control, you're nuts. But anyway, I provided a bunch of basic data on the market over time for a guy named David Harper, and his article finally dropped today. It's in the show notes. It's in a long-form content site called Skitched. Let me see if I can pull that up on the other screen here to at least show you the beginnings of it. Sorry, a little bit of screen juggling, and if we go over to camera 2, that should be on your monitor now. The Collecting Conundrum by David Harper. Anyway, so it's a cool article. It's an update to one he wrote a little while ago. It is a pace, I believe there's a trial period, but worth checking out. Dave writes some good stuff. It's nice to see real comics journalism, and one thing I'm really, I'm growing to really appreciate as we go and get into things like this is how much journalism still exists in the real world, except it is used for things like sports reporting and local news and comics industry reporting, where you actually call and you interview people and you get both sides of a story and you try to determine facts before you get to press. As far as I could tell, news reporting like we see on the TV, good grief in heaven. What a wasteland. But anyway, it's really great to see David and some of these other guys out there doing actual real comics work to cover the stories out there. So have a look at it. This one's essentially an opinion column with a lot of data in it, but well worth reading. All right, the main story though, DC splitting up from Diamond. Let me get back to the basics of this one. So if you guys haven't been following this story, once upon a time, Diamond Comic Distribution used to be the purveyor of basically all the comics in North America. That was as a result of the great distributor wars of the 1990s when, back in 1995, Marvel bought up an outfit called Heroes World Distribution, that they decided, hey, why should we be paying the freight over to Diamond, Diamond or Capital City Distribution? Why should we be, paying these guys anything when we could distribute it ourselves? How hard could distribution be? And within a few months, Marvel found out that distribution was very hard indeed. In the meantime, though, they had pulled, at that point, it was nearly 50% of the revenue out of the comics channel, and a series of consolidation moves in the industry led to there being, at the end, only one distributor left in America. That was Diamond Comics. The Capital City Comics was a very close competitor back in the day. They're out of, I want to say, Middleton, Wisconsin, might be Madison. Good folks, ran a good ship, unfortunately, but they weren't able to line up enough heavy hitters on their side when everyone started going exclusive, and so they had to fold. Well, within 18 months, Marvel's back at Diamond's door saying, can we come back in? This whole distributing ourselves thing did not go great. And Diamond says, well, of course you can. And for then and for the next 23 years or so, Diamond was the one place you would go to get a comic book if you lived anywhere in North America or most parts of England and beyond. Anyway, so apparently, COVID hit, and by some 20 years in or whatever else, Diamond's original deal with Marvel had expired. Not Marvel, but Diamond's original deal with DC had expired. So DC was a free agent at that point. At the end of March, Diamond Comic Distribution had announced that due to COVID restrictions in the Maryland area, they could no longer operate warehouses. They were, and so all comics were basically going to stop being distributed for a couple of 3 months, or at least until the restrictions were let off. At the end, I want to say at the end of May, let me look at my notes there, on June 5th, Diamond had to announce that DC had said, look, we're out of here. We're launching our own thing. We're partnering with two other distributors, UCS and Lunar Distribution. UCS, which is basically the mail order arm of Midtown Comics, and Lunar, which is basically a branch of DCBS Distribution. It's a comics at home kind of fulfillment service. Anyway, they said, well, what we'll do is originally we'll split it. One will be East Coast, one will be West Coast. Then after about a month of every comic retailer who's left in the country scratching their heads saying, what? And trying to get new accounts going up, eventually DC said, buy it from whoever you want. For our part, because we order like a mid-sized comic book store ourselves just to fund, to get the data that goes into ComicBase every week. We basically order one each of every mainstream comic book, and honestly, a crud ton of independents and so forth. Speaking of variants, no, we don't order all the bloody variants, especially not the ones that require you to buy 20 copies of something in order to get them. Our budget's huge, but it's not that big. But anyway, so we went and we wound up getting an account with UCS. Why UCS? No particular reason except that we called Lunar and they didn't return our phone calls right away. Either our website wasn't working right and it was kind of a mess. So the first people who got us an account and got set up properly and got us going was UCS Distribution. And for the last several months, we've been working with UCS to get our DC books in. They arrive, weekly as a separate shipment from the Diamond ones. We pay extra freight on that. Not loving that. If you're a comic store, your freight is a not at all insignificant part of their profit. And so, being able to consolidate orders, consolidate discounts, and consolidate freight is huge if you're a comic retailer. So merely the fact that you have to deal with two distributors every month instead of one is a really big deal to your local comic store. Well, anyway, we were getting our comics in, and then we did our things with them, and got them in to your to ComicBase and so forth. Your local comic stores, meanwhile, were getting their books actually even a little bit earlier than the traditional New Comic Wednesday. You would typically get them. Sometimes you get them as early as Monday, and definitely Tuesday if you're getting your DC books in. And honestly, from what we could tell, UCS was getting the job done. I have nothing bad to say about Midtown or UCS on that regard. Now, people ask why then did just now Diamond announce that they're no longer going to work with UCS. And I'll be honest with you, and this is again a part where I'm trying to stand up to the standards of journalism of the comics press, which unbelievably is actually a much higher standard than that of major news networks. with 3 letters in their name. And so we're actually trying to find, people willing to go on record and give statements, that are actually named sources and so forth, and give us an answer on it. Honestly, we found nobody who was doing such a thing. I also was able to come up with no credible news sources from anywhere which said the reasons behind the deal. Somebody was not happy, DC pulled the plug. That's the only thing I think we can say with any confidence at this point. Rumors to other things, you can find them on the web, but honestly, nothing that would make me look at it and say, oh yeah, definitely this would cause me to pull a distribution deal with one of the 2 people I've got that are just getting their feet under them, in order to distribute my comics. So, DC, I would love to hear your side of things, and at some point, it'd be great if you returned some calls and told us why, because we would like to know. But nevertheless, starting with product that ships in January, which means essentially product that has to be solicited and paid for by the comic stores for November. So when the November order form closes out, that's the product that ships in January. That's the last we will see of UCS in terms of DC product. So we, like everyone else, are now faced with, once again, all right, well, let's call up Lunar and see what we can do to get an account with them and everything. And this time, their operation ran a little smoother. They were able to get things going, and they are going to have someone call to verify our resale license and all that other stuff in the very near future, we're assured. But at the very least, their website's now working, and we're able to actually deal with them in something like a modern manner. So, here's hoping. I don't know of anyone who has anything bad to say about Lunar's distribution services. Sounds like they've really gotten the job done, which is amazing for something as broad as the comics market, that a small distributor can handle that kind of load on fairly short notice. And now apparently they'll be doubling their load. So I wish them all the best. And honestly, I really hope this works for them, because if they don't, I don't know how DC gets into comic stores. Unless they want to go crawling back to Diamond. This is obviously not an unprecedented move, but it's a real. This is way too many shocks for one industry in a year. I'm looking, again, and the subject I fear I will drift into if left without questions about ComicBase by the end of the broadcast, is just the effects of COVID on life and on business and retail, and how I dearly wish they will all end. But I'm just looking at what's left of the local comic scene out here in Nashville, and it's dang, man, it's harsh. It's so hard to run a store when you have to have social distancing. You can only have a couple people in. It's your goal, if you run a retail store, period, to want to have people stay in, chat with the people, browse a bit. The more, basically, as a metric says, the longer you're in a store, the more stuff you'll buy. So if you can get to people to more or less camp out in your store all day, that's really kind of your win. But with the current way that life is going down in terms of restrictions and whatnot, and the fact that you're wearing a mask and breathing your own exhaust and everything else in there, I don't know a lot of people who are spending time browsing in any store right now. I feels like right now you're kind of like get out to even the stores that are open, and that is just brutal on stores that frankly you don't need to be in. Nobody needs a comic store, except for your soul. So it's like, but it isn't like running out of milk, or like the kids will starve or something if I don't get my latest issue of Wonder Woman. But it does put a lot of friction on what already was a habit that was really burdened by high cover prices and erratic moves by publishers and a lot of different changes to characters we love and things like that. This is something that just, again, I feel like when the dust settles, it's not going to be great. Let me go ahead and have a quick look at the chat here, see how we're doing. All right, Andrew says, hi, Pete and all, Virginia, our Oregon house. Richard wants a beer. Okay, and, oh, awesome. Craig signed in from Australia. I knew we were going to get Australian on the podcast today. Yeah, isn't relative alcoholic a subject how much you drink when the in-laws are staying with you? So true. If the in-laws are watching, no offense, just everyone's all stressed out right now. Okay, so talking about things in the new release of ComicBase, I will be talking a bit about that. We'll be getting to that one. And F of Eisen, hello, and Pillar replies, ditto. Buddy Saunders, all right, Gregory Hex says, Buddy Saunders, in his weekly email last night indicated DC didn't dump UCS, it was the other way around. Interesting. I had not heard that. I would be very, very curious to find out more. And honestly, if I get an update on that, I want to fill you guys in on this one, because clearly it's a story of interest to all of us. Getting through the DC order form is now a pain in the tuchus. Absolutely. Although I will say, with as little product is coming out from the DC order form, our ordering folks are getting through all the stuff in a fraction of the time it used to be, because there's so little content. Which, by the way, brings me to probably the most salient part of the move to Lunar. So it isn't just like, well, did you like UCS? Did they get the job done? Okay, well, great, now you're switching to Lunar. The switch to Lunar comes with a new proviso, and that is they want a $125 at retail spend per week, or $500 per month, and until they get that from you, they're going to hold your order and not ship it to you. So let's say at an average $4 or $5 cover price, let's say DC's only putting out a couple of books that week, right? What do you do if you're if you're a store? I mean, do you pad your order, and order extra copies of the new Titans special or something in order to hit your 125 minimum, just so they ship you the comic books that everyone's got on your pull and hold list? What happens if a bunch of your local subscribers who are, what if you're just around that limit, and enough people go on vacation and everything, that you go below that limit? Has everyone in your comic store, does new comic book day go away from them, etc.? So I mean, this is I mean, it's funny because you say $500 at retail, at an average, basically about a 50% rough discount, right? You say, well, that's not so much, is it, right? And there was some lazy math done in one of the articles, which says, oh, well, all the comics are $4.99 each now, so that's just 25 comics a week. Well, yes and no. You see, first of all, not all the comics are $4.99, right now. Some are $3.99. Some might even be cheaper. But more importantly, a bunch of them from week to week don't ship. So it isn't like you're getting a solid slew of Batman, Wonder Woman, Justice League, and so forth, stuff that everyone wants to buy every week. Some weeks are very heavy, some weeks not so much. And if you really start enforcing this $125 per week thing before we even fulfill your order, unless you're a pretty decent-sized comic store, I could absolutely see your DC order following, for a particular week falling below that. Our overall order runs to the thousands, for just running ComicBase. But, what's our DC part? I don't know. It's actually, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get in trouble, on the odd week. And so we're going to have to find ways of dealing with that just in ComicBase terms. Another thing we've got to deal with just in terms of ComicBase with this whole thing is we had worked out over time, Diamond Comics over time actually built up a pretty good IT operation where they would get everyone they're called the solicitation sheets. It's a list of all the comic books they'll be coming out, who's going to be writing them or drawing them, what a little one-line summary of what the comic is all about, ideally some preliminary art so we can say what the comic will look like. All the all-important barcode number so that when it comes in we can actually have the barcode ready to go for you guys when you scan it. DC was actually really good at providing that kind of stuff. And we had developed tools over the years which would then load in their order form and would allow us to pull that data in and get it added into ComicBase pretty much the same week or two that it was solicited. Well, when DC dropped out of the Diamond order form, it went on to the UCS order form. It's like, well, I don't know, guys. It's a completely different order form. It comes out weekly. It's all kind of scattershot. It's in kind of an erratic format. We can't really process it like the way we used to. Let's kind of watch and wait for a little bit on that one. And for the moment, the policy was, because books are shipping so erratically, we'll wait till they come in and then we'll index them at the time they come in, and get them scanned and indexed and so forth, and they show up in ComicBase that week, but not necessarily before that week. Whereas you might have seen that prior to the whole Wu-Flu thing, we were actually regularly hitting stuff 2 and 3 months ahead of time in terms of when it would arrive in ComicBase, as at least in a rough indexing form. Is an entry for all the new books. That went away with COVID. Thank you. But we never got that going with UCS, and now it's like, well, okay, at least I didn't spend, however long it would require to be able to ingest and deal with all the weirdness of those sheets and map it onto what we're doing. But now I got to do the same thing with Lunar in a whole new format. So, yay, more work. But we got to find something to do, because especially if there's any hope or any threat that the shipments might not arrive like clockwork every week, we got to find another way of getting the data out there for you guys when it arrives. I mean, I think you guys will forgive us if the J variant of Red Sonja, the one that required 300 copies to order before they give it to you, or is only available at conventions, I think you guys will forgive us if that one's not there right when the book first ships, because we get it, it's a weird variant. But if Justice League 53 comes out, that thing better be in ComicBase on the day it ships, because otherwise it looks like we're just not doing our darn job. So that is something we are going to be doing a little bit of scrambling to manage. But yeah, we're rolling with the punches just like the rest of you. Honestly, we got the note about this thing on Monday just at the same time everyone else did. Okay. Let's see. Richard says, won't impact me, ready to drop DC and all the crap they're doing. Wouldn't have happened in the past. To which Mike says, blasphemy, we all need comics. It's funny. DC is also, and I wanted to maybe see if you guys want to talk about this a little bit, probably on a future podcast. You know how all the publishers want to always get you interested in new things they're doing, and also you need to have ways to try out new stuff and new artists and new writers and so forth in a way that doesn't jeopardize Batman or the Justice League or Superman, right? You're not, if you're a new comic artist or something, you're not going to get your first break on doing Batman. That's just not the way it goes. That's the crown jewels, right? But you do, so at the same time, you want to be able to develop new stuff, new intellectual property, and launch new stories. That's where all the excitement in the field comes from. Well, one of the kind of ritualized ways that comic companies do this is they stage events, right? So, they had, like, for instance, DC had the 1 million, events, which, boy, that was fun for us back in the day, back in the early 90s when comic numbers did not go to 1 million, and I'll tell you that story in a bit, but they had the 1 millions, they had Bloodlines, they had a number of other crossover events and so forth, where you can try to get everybody interested in, like, kind of a little bit of a relaunch of this character, that character, maybe introduce some new things, some new concepts and so forth. DC is doing a new one called Future State, where the idea is that they're going to have any number of characters coming in the next couple months that are set either in 2030 and beyond, up to the end of time, apparently, in the DC universe. And it looks like, I mean, some of it, honestly, the stuff that does not thrill me at all is the stuff that's like the usual gender bends on, normal characters, or like, yeah, we're going to make Wonder Woman a Hispanic woman who's, has a problem getting to her jeans, whatever the deal is that they're going to try. And yes, before you guys call me out, yes, I know I'm referring really to the one cover in the Wonder Woman 75th whatever book, but I'm not really referring to the new one that they were floating for Future States. So don't breathe down my neck on that one. But yeah, they want to try all the different mashups and different takes on different characters. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of these ones. They're just like, yeah, we're gonna launch 80 different titles, and it'll all be number ones of this, that, and the other thing. And oh, look, it's the new character that's exactly like Superman, except he's got a little bondage ring on his collar, and he looks a little more down than usual. I'm not thrilled by that. I really do feel like the bottom line in comics is, tell me a good story with some characters I care about. I mean, that's just it. But there is going to be a big event coming up on the whole thing, and that's still scheduled to go on. They apparently have canceled or put on hold their Gen 5 or 5th Gen or whatever the heck they were calling it, which was going to be another wholesale re-envisioning of the universe. It sounded, from the bits that that leaked out ahead of time, really, really woke and unfun to me. But your mileage may vary. But apparently it will go. It's not getting off at all because it's not rolling, according to Jim Lee, who's now currently running the show over at DC Comics. All right. Let's see. My soul's a hell of a lot more important than a gallon of milk. Yeah, it's so true. All right. Let's see. DC had great stories before New 52. Yeah, I mean, these opinions are. I mean, these big, I'm going to re-envision everything you ever knew before events are really, really divisive with longtime fans. Honestly, I only barely managed to cope with post-crisis Superman, right? I mean, I have problems with this kind of stuff going way back, and that's about 5 retcons of the DC universe ago. I mean, after a while, I mean, like, if all my, emotions were tied up around, Steve Barnes, I'm sorry, sorry, I was about to cross universes over into Marvel, but if all my emotions are around one set of characters who have always been a certain way, and they always relate to the audience, and they always represent something in my life, just sitting there and saying, okay, yeah, I've now, instead of a 6 foot tall, white dude from Iowa playing Superman, it's now some, 5'4" munchkin from, Bangladesh. I mean, whatever the heck insane stuff you come up with, I'm not going to feel the same about the character. And so you can't just sit there and graft the name onto the new character. Now, that being said, I don't mind at all if you launch a brand new character, which is a 5'4" munchkin from, Lilliput or whatever. I mean, like, I don't care. Just make me fall in love with that character for their own reasons, not just because they carry the branding of another character that I used to like. That's why I do not get why Wonder Woman is now, a completely different person than Diana Prince. I don't get, I mean, I get in a way you set up that the Green Lanterns are really just, it's a whole squad of people who all just happen to wear the same uniform. Yeah, okay, fine, that's cool. And during all of Green Lantern history, I think there have been exactly 2 of them that have ever, gotten any kind of interest from fans. So it's, brand extension just by taking the look of the character and grafting onto an entirely different character who looks and behaves entirely differently. That's crap. I mean, it's just, don't do it. It's horrible storytelling. And I don't care if the person you're doing it to is James Bond or Luke Skywalker or, Ganthet. So really, it's like, I get from a corporate IP standpoint, it makes complete sense. But from a readers who are relating to a story standpoint, it feels like sacrilege. And so, I would just implore all you comic companies out there, don't do it. Make new characters and make us love them for their own right. Anyway, that's a bit of a tear there. 32 Comics at $3.99 if you stock just one collected edition. That's all you need or floppies. Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to hit the 125 nut. I'm sorry, my keying went off. If I'm not very clever when I'm switching, I have 2 different ways to switch cameras. One is I've got a big console right in front of me. If I just slap the big glowing button that says 2, then the camera goes over to my screen, and you slap the big one that says 1, it goes on there. Over to the live camera and me and so forth. The problem with that is that it also turns off the keying, the chroma keying, which is what allows me to change titles. So when I'm really smart and I'm on my game, I hit this other set of buttons that actually invokes a macro which does all the right things and doesn't switch off titles. So I apologize to everyone. I'm out of practice on switching cues up. I'm gonna get better. Let's see. Yeah, future state may be an opportunity for my wall to go dormant as far as DC is concerned, says Gregory Hecht. All right, so, and Mark Russell's chance for me. Let's see. #1 issues all the time. Yeah, that's... it's funny because I, as you guys know, I sell whatever comes in through the door unless I really am in love with it, like, Hellblazer, or for that matter, the Eagle Moss collected editions, which I swear to God, I'm going to show you guys in like 2 weeks because I'm actually having new bookcases brought in to replace the cruddy, particle board, faced with, the world's cheapest veneer bookshelves that are actually in my office. They were here when I moved in, and the office wall is such a weird size, it was impossible to replace them. But anyway, the Eagle Moss collection is nearly complete, and it will be sitting on beautiful new oak bookshelves, and I will take a photo of that one in a couple weeks. Maybe even give you guys an office tour. Once I have those in. Honestly, I'm so embarrassed by these particle board bookshelves. I don't want to show anyone anything until then. So, anyway, one thing I was going to say is, so anything that comes in the door after we're done with it, we scan it, we index it, we note the storylines, and all the creators and editors and whatnot. Well, it usually goes out the other end it gets posted to Atomic Avenue, and it goes out at whatever the current guide price is, and boom, and then people will go and sell it. I always know when DC is done with, or Marvel is done with these big cross whatever events, like the current one is Death Metal, and for Marvel it's Empire with a Y, because it forces us to get like 80 divider labels, title dividers, all next to each other to house the one issue each of all the crossover #1 specials. You know, it's like, you know, Death Metal, Dark Knight, Metal Apocalypse, you know, featuring Green Lantern, issue 1. Which will be right next to the 80 different covers featuring 3 other characters, which it's funny because these ones do not move super fast. I mean, I would be a liar if I told you they're like, oh well, who cares, I made 80 different title of ours, but they're gone in 3 weeks. No man, these things stick around. I'm always thrilled when someone takes an interest years after the fact in collecting all these crossover events, or the solo series, or the Bloodline series, or whatever the thing was that generated these 80 title dividers all in a row here, because it allows me to reclaim them, for labeling new comics. So anyway, word to the wise, if you guys are interested in clearing out any crossover one-shot things, have a look at my store on Atomic Avenue. atomicavenue.com/store/pbickford, and if you do want to order just a shed load, as the Brits would say, of crossover one-shot event things, I'll cut you a deal. Send me a note. All right. Anyway, moving on. All right. So DC annuals. Honestly, I don't mind the DC annuals so much. So this is something, the idea of an annual, it's built into the publishing schedule, where if you're cranking new content on a 4-week schedule, and you're only contracted, for 10 or so releases per year on the whole thing, you wind up with some extra time in the schedule where you can slide in special events, and that's usually where the annuals come in. Actually, I like annuals for what they traditionally were, which is a way for the editor who has been getting all these submitted pages from new creators and such, or just maybe someone who's usually an artist, but you want to give them a chance writing, or maybe someone who's coming in from another company and wants to write under a pseudonym, or maybe it's just somebody who been out of the game for a while. Whatever the thing is, you have a chance. Typically what would happen in the old days is all these things would pile up in your file cabinet of like, yeah, okay, I bought the story, it's 8 pages long, I can't use it right now, maybe it'll be a backup in a giant size, maybe it'll be a backup in some kind of collected thing, or I'll put 4 of them together and there's my annual. Maybe sometimes 5 or 6, depending on how crazy big your annual gets. So I actually don't mind those. It's a grab bag to be sure, but I do like having an opportunity for new people to bust into the industry and do it by trying to write their best stuff. The ones I hate are the ones where it says like, yeah, we need to have something involving all our hot characters, and Ghost Rider and the Punisher and Wolverine are all super hot right now. So now we need to have something where Ghost Rider, Wolverine, and the Punisher go, and they meet all the Marvel characters individually, and they have a big running fight. I hate that stuff. It's awful. It's a complete, it burns out fans. It sets their wallet on fire if they try to collect any of it, and it's just a soulless experience. I mean, nothing is ever going to move in the universe as a result of all this one, even though they're always advertised as this is the thing that will change everything forever. No, it never changes anything for very long at all, and it just burns out your fandom. Anyway, meh. Okay. Hey, we have an actual question on ComicBase. Thank you, Confident Man. Let's see here. Update to download the archive edition. How large is my friend is trying to do the download over an iPhone connection that seems to be taking very long? Yeah. If I'm understanding the question right, what's happening is you're using your iPhone as like a data pairing kind of deal. So you're pulling down over LTE or some other kind of modem type of thing. The archive is a beast to download. It's if you download the whole thing, it's about 30 gigs. So factor that into your bandwidth bill appropriately. If you're going over LTE, metered connection especially, don't do it. It'll kill you. But a decent Wi-Fi connection, like if you got wireless, AC or maybe even G or N. you got that ticking over, and you got a decent internet connection. Most people's cable connection, if you can pull a sustained 2 or 3 megs down, everything else just as a sustained download, you should be able to get that one in under an hour to get the whole thing. But yeah, it's a beast. God bless you if you have gigabit. That's better, but unfortunately we can't serve it quite that fast. The best our media servers will do on a typical metered connection is 12 megs if you hit on a good day when no one else is doing anything else with the whole thing. 2 or 3 megabit per second is much more typical for what you get by the time, even if you have a really fast connection, by the time it gets done, running the inside of your firewall and your wireless router and whatever else. You're actually doing pretty good if you're getting 2 or 3 megs down sustained. So don't plan on getting anything that much bigger. But generally, it's just say, yeah, let it run for a bit. An hour should get all the parts of it. The main program installer is about a gig. Good news, on the other hand, is with the newest edition that's coming out soon, we did do a rejiggering of. We can't make the data take any less space, but we did do some stuff to split updaters so that when you download, you go from, say, let's say the new version is called, ComicBase, Infinity, So if ComicBase Infinity 1.0 comes out, you're going to download, the gig or however much the program installer is the first time. But when Infinity, ComicBase Infinity 1.0.1 comes out, you're probably only going to download about a 20 meg thing. And matter of fact, it's so fast, we can automatically download it for you, and it's like a one-click install. So that's actually something we spent a lot. We talked about this in one of the earlier live streams, and I'm really kind of stoked because it works just ridiculously well. Even in the testing group for the new build, it's the way that most of us get our new builds. Is we just set it so it checks every time the program launches for if there's anything new. It says, oh yeah, this new thing. Here's the new things it does. Do you want to update? So you hit go, and it's like 2 clicks later, you're running the new version. So that's pretty slick. It's getting better. The one thing we can't do, unfortunately, is I don't have a way to download all 4 of the archive picture discs at once. That was a failed experiment, unfortunately, with the new version. I actually got interested in doing this when I downloaded Red Dead Redemption on my Xbox, which was insane. It was a 100 gig install off of the Blu-rays, and then it wanted to download about a 20 gig patch, and so it was like 3 days between when I started trying to play the game and when I finally got on a horse and went anywhere. And by then I was like, I didn't even care about the game anymore. But anyway, it was very interesting though watching how did they go about downloading all that content, because one thing I knew was you can't download reliably anything larger than about 8 gigs over a standard internet kind of packetizing protocol, because it just blows up too many things in the middle. And so we actually did a lot of investigating, looking toward this next version, and we thought, well, what would it take to be able to run one installer, which as part of its install automatically downloads all 4 of those discs one after another and then installs them all at once. And we actually got it running. And it was really cool. I mean, it was a really long download, unless you were sitting there rocking just a crazy fast connection. I mean, even then, it was kind of like a mini version of my experience with Red Dead Redemption. But at least you weren't having to go back and install the pictures and hit the next disk, install the pictures. And I thought, well, this is terrific. One problem, and that one problem was a killer, which was there was no way for us to install all the discs at once and not overwrite any existing pictures you had. That was just something the installer company that we use, it just wasn't in the cards. It wasn't something they could support. So, if you were installing ComicBase Archive as a brand new thing, we could do it in one click, download everything. It was all good. It was a lengthy install, but it was at least one click, and that was terrific. But I just needed one feature that it couldn't give me in this particular version of the installer, which is the ability to say, and if I've got any pictures that are the same, allow me to leave them the heck alone. Because if you scanned your own comics in, or if you have some really great high-res scans of some things you did, I cannot in good faith overwrite those. I have to give you at least the option of leaving those be. And because our installer, the software that we use doesn't support that in their current version, we weren't able to get that to happen. That is much longer answer to this question than I'm sure you wanted to know. But anyway, that's the deal. Okay. Yeah, I think we hit that one. Bring his laptop, the wire connection if needed. Yeah, I would definitely suggest if you're downloading it and you're having a hard time downloading any big thing, bring it over to a wire connection if you ever can. All right, and we're gonna I think I hit this one. Annual script for reprints. Let's see here. The program updates for archive are 30 gigs. No, the program updates aren't. The program updates are typically the same size as the original installer for ComicBase 2020 because they basically are the original installer. That's one thing we stopped doing when we did ComicBase 2020 is we learned the hard way after about 1 million revs of ComicBase where the way that program updates work when you have to potentially update not just one file but like a ton of files, like a database and graphic files and things like that, it's not feasible to make a patcher to update dozens or hundreds of files. So you have to make an installer. So the thing that we did in the past is we would have one big program installer, so version 15.0, call it, of ComicBase. You'd install ComicBase 15.0, and then 15.0.1 would come out. And we'd say, well, okay, for 15.0.1, we changed the program, and maybe we changed the stock database that came with it and added 2 graphic files. So we would make a separate 15.0.1 updater, which would then stick a new program file on your disk and a new whatever files had changed. We would do that. The problem then is what happens when we got to do 15.0.2, because we can't stack the updaters on top of each other, and we can't update the updater. It wasn't something that we could do. And it got us into these ridiculous situations where in order to install 15.0.2, you had to uninstall 15.0.1. And no matter how we tried to communicate that in terms of, oh no, important, read me, if you've got any updaters, install them first, this was always just guaranteed to make our phone start ringing in terms of tech support. So when ComicBase 2020 came out, we said, we're going to rethink everything we've ever done. And one of the things that we did is we said, look, the update situation after the first update, it's a nightmare. It confuses everyone. We got to not do this. But everyone's internet is getting much, much faster than it used to be back in the day when we were trying to save a couple bytes so it would download faster. Could we reasonably make it so that whenever you did an update, it just installed the whole program again, so that it always works, it always installs everything, and so whenever you download from the registrations page, you're always getting the very latest version. There's no patchers for ComicBase 2020 anymore. So what it does is, whenever you download it, you really are downloading the whole thing. So if it's a gig, it's a gig, but it's never more than a gig, and you never have to uninstall the previous thing. What I was saying before about the next version, though, is we realized that most of the space that's taken up for the installer, and the biggest installer, ironically, is our least powerful program. It's the ComicBase Express Edition, because it comes with all the stock pictures, even though they're really small pictures, and there's a tiny amount compared to other versions. We actually bundle them into one big install file, so you've got one install file with 15,000 pictures blotched into it, and so that one is actually the biggest installer. I believe that one is like 1.1 gigs or something like that. Now I'm thinking about it, I think the 2020 archive installer is maybe it's 100 megs or something, because with the later editions of ComicBase, or the upper editions, so the Pro and especially the archive, the pictures are so many. There's what is it, about 50,000 I think in the Pro edition, which is just the number ones for 58,000 issues or whatever else, and then the archive edition obviously has I think we're up to 688,000 covers in it now. It's psychotic how many are in there now. That one's on 4 DVDs, but because there's separate installers for those things, you install the program separately, and so if all you're doing is installing the program in the database, it's much smaller. Anyway, with all that said, when we do a program file patch to like the archive or the Pro or the Express or whatever else, the installer in the past would include both the stock database, which is the biggest part of it, which that'd be a few hundred megs, and then it would include the program files and the graphics and all the other things that they're kind of integral to the program itself. Well, one thing we realized is that almost none of the stock database and the stock graphics and the reports and things like that rarely change. And so what we can do is we can take all the things that basically never change, like the splash screen that loads when you first launch the program. We can take that, put it in a separate installer that you install one time. And we take all the things that do change a lot, like the program code itself, and we can put that in another installer that's much smaller. And so now when you do an update, what it does is, with the new version, is it first time out is it says, okay, well I don't have any of the new stuff for the new version. Let me go ahead. I'll download all those resources, the stock database and all the standard graphics, things like that. I'll download those one time. As it's called, as a prerequisite to the main program. But then I'll install the main program. The main program is only, I don't know, I want to say it's like 30 megs or something. It's tiny compared to old versions. And then when you run an installer, so we do the 0.0.1 version. Typically, we're not going to update the installer that installs all the stuff that never changes. We're only going to update the installer that installs the new stuff. So when we install that one, it says, I already got the other stuff. I don't need to download that again. It just installs the new stuff, takes 2 seconds, and you're done. Anyway, it's better. I look forward to showing it to you guys. It's one of these weird little quality of life things that just makes a lot of difference. And it took stupid amounts of work. It was literally weeks and weeks of work just to get that to roll. But I think it pays off because everyone has to do it, and we do it again and again and again over the life of the program. So I'm glad we more or less sussed that one out. All right. All right. So let's see. Just the archive. Steve says just the archive install is just over 15 megs. That's on the new one. If you want the picture disk, add another 30. Yeah. So the archive installer on the new one is tiny because it's just the program. All right. All right, and so that is that stuff right there. Okay, if there's any other questions on ComicBase things, let me know. The good news is we're starting to round out the hour. So this is what I want to step into a little bit, and it's going to sound like I'm getting political. Maybe it is. So if you can't stand it, feel free to switch off. You won't hurt my feelings. But I'm going to say the biggest story of the week, honestly, was tech censorship. It's, whatever you think about the comings and goings of crazy, politicians and the stuff that they leave in computer stores or crack pipes in backs of things or whatever else, or who yelled at who about what, honestly, I could care less. I mean, look, politically, I am incredibly cynical. I find it, as they say, hard to be even appropriately cynical about politicians. I've written them off ages ago, and to anyone who's an honest politician in the world, you have my apologies, because you're so rare, I probably don't recognize you as often as I might, but I've just been burned so many times that I expect no good from someone who goes into politics for a living. This is just what 53 years of life on this planet has left me, feeling, is I distrust people who want to have a lot of power over me just innately. And like I say, it is possible for a good man or woman to hold power. It is an absolutely possible thing, but I do believe that power has a corrupting influence. Well, anyway, the real corrupting influence I think we've seen over the demonstrated just dramatically as anything in the last week has actually been not with the politicians, because again, I expect nothing, but with tech. I mean, this is my own beloved field. As you guys maybe know, I worked for Apple for 9 years. I was very proud to work there. I have been on gigs at Google. I've been, I've been all up and down the Bay Area, doing all these things, and I feel like I was in on, a lot of the personal computer revolution and on what eventually became the social media thing, right as it was getting started, and for the most part, tech back in the day had kind of a libertarian, hey, it's the Wild West, but we're just here to empower people by letting them share information. That, once upon a time, was actually the ethos of Silicon Valley. It is clearly not that way anymore. If you had any delusions that is the way it's going on anymore, you had to have lost them this week. Because, as one, you had the biggest political story of that I could ever even remember, breaking. And as one, big tech decided we are going to block access to posting, the story at all. So we're not going to, we've seen soft bans before, of different things where they say, well, we don't really agree with this point of view, or don't we really agree with this other point of view, or we do like this guy, or we don't like that guy, and so we're going to prioritize or not prioritize certain content. And this honestly is a scummy move on the part of Google and other search engines. It's why I don't use Google as my search engine anymore, because I got tired of just looking for random things and having really strange results come up that were just like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Like for a while, and it's an ever-changing thing. You do this experiment, or you used to be able to do this experiment. Again, it's an ever-changing thing. If you just Google a term like American inventors, right, you will see a perfectly racially balanced cornucopia of all sorts of important and really unimportant people, highlighting the image search page. It's a lovely panoply of American life. Unfortunately, out of the 50 or so people you see there, 12 of them will be anyone that you would ever have noted as doing something any particularly interesting. Like inventing the telephone or something, or the electric light bulb. Then that'll be gained by someone who like invented a filament tube that got used in a cathode ray at some point, who just because they came from the right ethnic or sex background or whatever else, is suddenly on the same search page. I get tired of nonsense like that. I want just fair results. I mean, if those were legitimately the top results according to the rules of the game, like they are the most linked pages because everyone's buzzing about the person who invented the carbon fiber element for the cathode ray tube, well, okay, fair enough. I'm not telling people what to believe, but I do hate it when people want to try to influence my thinking. Anyway, the story, and if this, I don't think we're worth blocking, was basically Hunter Biden, the kid of the vice president and current presidential candidate, along with a history which included leaving crack pipes in the back of Hertz cars, apparently decided he wasn't going to pick up 3 laptops he had dropped off to a repair shop. And after, the repair shop guy hounded him and said, hey guys, it's time to pick these things up. After 90 days of him not responding to the calls, he said, okay, I guess they're mine. And so he goes poking around on the whole thing, finds a bunch of stuff that seemed dicey to him, calls the FBI. They come and say, hey, no worries, we're going to pick up the laptop. It goes, and this is like a year ago, it goes off and he just disappears. The repair shop guy, apparently a bit of a conspiracy buff, whatever you want to call him, but paranoid, what the heck, had made a copy. And that's the copy that made its way into the news this last week. Except that if you watched any amount of news on the mainstream, or if you try to tweet about it or wherever else, this was a story that was carried in the New York Post. This is the oldest paper in America, apparently founded by Alexander Hamilton. It's the number 5 paper in America. This is not, the Sturmer. This is not, Joe's conspiracy blog. Now, given the state of American journalism, or for that matter, journalism anywhere, is it a absolute arbiter of truth in the world? Hell no. And honestly, you're nuts if you believe that of anyone right now, including what I'm saying to you now. But the thing that is chilling as hell is instantly Twitter decided that if you tried to tweet the story, it was instantly blocked. Google would not pass on the link. Facebook would not pass on the link, and they admitted they were not going to. It went out and issued a statement saying, "Yeah, we're going to throttle the traffic on this one." Basically, what happened is, whether you believe the story or not, whether or not you are concerned by the story. Honestly, maybe it doesn't bug you, but the point is that the big tech decided that you were not good enough to make up your own mind on this one. They were going to tell you what to think on this one. This is no way to run a free society. This concerns me greatly. The part where some tech overlord can say, well, no, you guys are way too dumb. For your own protection, I'm going to label things I disagree with as being, well, this is suspicious, or, but this has been debunked, or whatever the thing is. Honestly, I don't care if it is Joe's crackpot conspiracy blog. If I'm interested in it, let me read the damn thing and make up my own mind. This is what being an adult is called. And the idea that you are only going to get fed one point of view and nothing outside of that can ever enter your mind, First of all, they're nuts if they think this works. This, according to an MIT story, made this story trend twice as far as it would have gone if they just left it the hell alone. Now, maybe that's true, maybe it's not. I have no idea how you would study that. But there's nothing that makes something more. It's called the Streisand effect. After the idea that Barbara Streisand says, "Look, I can't stand having planes fly over and take pictures of my beautiful coastline," and she found like one photograph of this thing, and she protested, "No, you have to take it out of your aerial library. You can't show this one." And immediately, everyone in the world suddenly wanted to fly over a property and take pictures of it because she said, you're not allowed to. It does the same thing with any kind of information. It leads to, in Russia, it's called samizdat. It's the information you have to smuggle around on the back channels to get what you think is the true story behind everything. Look, the only way to talk about anything in a free society is we knock it out, we argue it out, we question sources, we say, well, is this credible? Is this not credible? Did he really drop the thing off, or is it, is it a plant, whatever else? To sit there and just say, no, I'm better than you. I've made up my mind. I'm going to make up my mind for you. No, it's all questionable information. First of all, it's laughable. Given the standards by which questionable information has been pounded on the other side of things. But it's just so clearly biased. It threatens just our ability to, as adults, to stay free in an information society. I mean, I know that sounds grandiose, but this is the kind of thing that I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. We all ought to be sitting there saying, no, guys, we don't do it this way in America. And I think that's the biggest story for everything that's going on right now. There are other things that concern me. They're the minor notes. Sony came out with a little change to their latest terms, saying, "Oh, by the way, your PS5, voice chat may be recorded." And it's there apparently to power a feature where if you feel that someone's been mean to you on voice chat, excuse me, I apparently neglected to mute one thing. Apparently, do not disturb did not count as far as Vonage calls on my phone as well. So apologize for that, guys. But Sony, apparently, if you're sitting there talking smack as you're wailing on them in Call of Duty, apparently this guy can now apparently you've consented by merely the fact you're using a PS5 and clicking on the I accept the terms of that license that no one read. You're also allowing him to record you. Now, what does that mean? It means I guess you better watch your language as you're talking smack while you're blowing them away with a rocket launcher. Did we really ask for big tech to be our big brother this way? I, for one, did not. Yelp has decided they're going to helpfully introduce a brand new feature. This is lovely, because I can't see this one being abused at all. Let's see if I can find the graphic for it. Sorry, I had it queued up ahead of time, guys, and it's probably on a tab. Oh, there we are. Yeah, here we are. Throw it up on the other one. Yes, to keep you, safe in this wide world of ours, Yelp is going to allow you to, essentially going to add a new flag to say whether or not when you go and you look up a restaurant, whether or not they've been accused of racist behavior or not. So, I don't know, Bob's Auto Shop, right? He could have a disaffected mechanic. Maybe he was rude to a customer. Maybe whatever else. Maybe someone went off on him. Maybe he went off on someone else. But what'll happen is some Yelp reviewer now could say Bob's a racist, and that won't be the black mark of all time on Bob. I'm certain though that no one would ever abuse charges of racism against someone who did nothing wrong, because it's such a serious charge in American life. No one would ever do that. It's far too serious, right? Can't see this leading to anything bad, so that's lucky, right? Honestly, we're already at a point now where it's everything I can do. I mean, I stewed half the night. Even this stuff bugs me to death because I'm basically a free speech absolutist. I'm like, look, you are allowed to say whatever crud is on your mind. Everyone is the beautiful thing about America is everyone gets an opinion. It's yours doesn't need to be the same as mine. And honestly, I might come around to your point of view if you argue it well enough, or if you introduce me to some facts I hadn't heard of before. But I may or may not ever be able to convince you of my opinion on everything. But the whole point that we get to talk is sacred to being Americans in life. This is the whole point. and I feel like it's something that's being taken away from us. I was going to say, even you know, as we are talking right now, Google has got a genius text-to-speech captioner running on everything I'm babbling about, and you know, while this allows it to do things like saying offering services to you know, people who can't hear very well and whatever else, it also is running everything I say through a you know, AI recognizer for certain words. As a result of that, I work just, you know, while I'm working, I'll often have the Nerdrotic NERD ROTIC, in case you're caring, podcast going on. It's a guy named Gary Buechler. He used to be a comic store owner up in San Francisco. He babbles on about comics with a bunch of friends and stuff. You know, have that going while I'm working in the background. It's just, again, it's like I work alone, so it's like having friends around. I noticed that all the guys on his show are careful to always say Yahtzees when they're talking about the people who were on the German side back in World War II. Because apparently the text-to-speech algorithm, or I'm sorry, the speech-to-text algorithm, if it catches, you know, the N-word, you know, it is likely to make it so their podcast suddenly reaches, you know, 100th of the people that they, you know, had beforehand. I don't know when we signed up for this. I don't know when we went from, hey, the internet's wonderful because you can say whatever you want and maybe you'll draw an audience, maybe you won't, maybe you'll find friends, maybe you won't, to no, it's very important that we be protected from ourselves and our neighbors. And I gotta say, I'm not down with it. I hope we can stop it before there is no stopping it. And so that is something that actually causes me to be in a little bit off mood tonight. So I apologize for that. But I do think it's the first time I've ever seen, like I say, the #1 news story, you know, be embargoed in real time by all the machinery of big tech as we are in the end of an election season. I literally would have thought this would have been beyond the pale. I didn't think that big tech would have dared go there. And they did. And if they dare and it sticks, man, I don't know what the next thing is. So even if this story doesn't bug you, man, think about the next one. I feel like we need another way to go where, you know, our tech overlords can't have this kind of control over our lives. And here I am broadcasting on their platform as I say this. And honestly, I'm half hoping that I'm too small to notice. But I mean, if this thing, you know, if I'm looking at my, you know, my YouTube page, you know, 2 weeks from now, and it says, you know, film is unavailable, you know, this thing is unavailable or whatever else, I will be the least surprised guy on the planet. Anyway, guys, that's it for now. I'm gonna stay off with this, away from this one for now. Next time out, I want to talk Halloween stuff. It was going to be Tales from the podcast, or Tales from the live stream. I don't know if you noticed my little guy behind me right here. That's my favorite Halloween decoration of all time. And when I fire him up, he's got a little flickery candle bulb and everything. I am in love with Tales from the Crypt and EC horror film comics from the 50s and everything. And I want to talk some about that sort of stuff, share Halloween stories, and let's do something a little bit more fun next time. And hopefully they won't blow up the comic industry or the, you know, free speech in the tech universe while we're at it. All right, guys. Let me do a quick check of the chat. And okay, I think, yeah. Racist lost all meaning. Absolutely. Does anyone remember the Supreme Sufi from Howard the Duck? No, I do not. I don't know that one at all. All right. All right, man. And Mike says, yeah, you don't agree. You know, I don't see you giving up any freedom except freedom, active responsibility. Look, it's. I mean, this is the nice way of saying, you know, kind of the chilling point. So, like, hey, man, it's like, I'd say it's a statement akin to, hey, man, it's like, you know, so I get to search your house using thermal imaging. You know, if you're not doing anything wrong, why would you bother, right? You know, why is it bad for you? I mean, so I get to, you know, control whether or not things you say get out in the world or not. You know, if you're not saying anything weird, why would it bother you? No, dude. I mean, it's. I don't mean you, Mike. I mean, I just. Yeah. But dude, it's like to anyone making the argument, and maybe I hope I didn't straw man the argument too much for you. I mean, I apologize if I did, but it's just, you got to, in a free society, we got to be able to be idiots from time to time. I mean, it's fine. One of the comedians I like least on planet Earth, I mean, Andrew Dice Clay. I've never found him funny. I mean, just like, and yet I'm always happy he's out there because I knew he was taking fire for people like me. Because honestly, as long as you can sit there and someone like, you're getting all mad at Andrew Dice Clay, he was so rude, he was so sexist, so insensitive, whatever else, then you're not going to get, down on that weird joke I made about French existential painting and, whether that was smarmy or whatever. I mean, it's just, we got to be able to, color outside the lines. And look, if we're either going to get a good response or a bad response from our audience, but it should be from the audience. It isn't from some grand overlord who says whether or not I get to even post something. And like I say, this was not, Joe Crackpot's conspiracy blog. This was the #5 paper in America, and the oldest paper in America. Literally, still has their Twitter shut down. They're literally not allowed to talk. You're not allowed to link to a story. I mean, no one's saying, am I allowed to verify the story? Can I question the story? Can I punch holes in the story? No, that's going on. No, it's like, no, I don't even need to discuss the story to you. I'm ruling it out of bounds per se. And god damn, man, that just chills me. I think the freedom to speech, no one has a problem with freedom of speech that you agree with. I mean, that's, the freedom of speech is all about freedom to speak things that people are going to disagree with. There's no point otherwise. And I think we need to be a little bit more zealous about guarding that. Anyway, that's my opinion at least. And one thing about it is, it's like, I can try to convince you. I can, win you to my side, not win you to my side. But, one thing I don't get to do is I don't get to say you don't get a voice, and I also don't get to beat you over the head with a bike lock. And anyone who is on the side of that thing has definitely lost my vote. So anyway, guys, let's survive till next time, and I'm having a beer. You guys take care. Bye-bye.